Heidi, thank you so much for joining today. I would love for you to introduce yourself, ThirdLove, and talk a little bit about founding the company.
Sure. I'm Heidi Zak, co-founder and CEO of ThirdLove. Um, Founded the company about 12 years ago now. And the mission of ThirdLove is to help women feel comfortable and confident starting with their first layer.
I love that. I've been a customer way back. I know you had talked about that promotion that you did that was like buy, try, and buy, and that got me.
You and a couple million women, that was
Yeah.
a really important way we learned to find product market fit and to scale in the early days when no one knew who ThirdLove was. It was a lot harder to get women to try us when we didn't have a ton of referrals.
Right, that makes sense. And marketing for so long was like, it's impossible to find a bra that fits you. And so then taking that step to try something online that you can't see and try on in store was such a big factor at the time, I think, too.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Well, one challenge that I see consistently are companies with products and they're looking to become a brand. And some startups get lost in their own brand and forget to sell, others only sell and are never able to truly grow into a lifestyle brand. How do you go about balancing performance marketing with brand building to achieve those short-term goals and long-term goals as well?
The age-old marketing question, yeah, is if there's an easy answer. I do think this idea that I think people have kind of got to some consensus on in the past couple of years of, in an ideal world, at least spending 30% of your budget on brand, quote unquote, brand marketing, which can be somewhat performance driven as well, feels like a good place to be. I think if you get further, what we found at ThirdLove is, when we were really trying to get to efficiency a couple of years ago, we pulled back further than that on brand marketing, and we definitely saw that longer term impact 6 to 12 to 18 months out. So I think at the highest level, that's a great place to start. Of course, some would argue even more should be spent on brand, but I think it's also very product dependent and life cycle dependent on your customer and the kind of product you're selling. So it's not like there's only one solution. But certainly you definitely need both. So for ThirdLove specifically, because we were a brand built on being different in the market in the early days and being an inclusive brand, a lot of the brand marketing we did was behind establishing that. And we did that through linear TV to some extent in the early days. Definitely podcasts. We were really, really early on podcasts. We started advertising on podcasts in 2015. I remember one of our investors was like, "What are podcasts?" And I'm like, "Yeah, it's this new thing that people are listening to." So those are like two of the channels we've used. I mean, we've always done some, a little bit of out of home, that kind of thing, but it's so hard to measure that's been a much smaller, that's overall was a much smaller like spend that we put into brand marketing.
Mhm. That makes sense. And when it comes to brand marketing now, are there any channels that you're seeing a lot of success on? And you mentioned measuring success. How do you look at success for those brand channels?
Yeah, it's definitely harder. I think today we've shifted more into CTV, connected TV, which again is a bit of a blend between brand and performance. What's nice about connected TV is there's less of the pressure to create this like highly branded spot, with linear. Again, there's a blend, but for sure, in years ago, we spent a lot of money creating those types of commercials. So there's less pressure. You can use, UGC. You can use, some of the video ads you have, and kind of come up with something that can work and actually can perform. We have different ways of looking at brand marketing specifically on other channels, and sometimes we use our checkout. We collect data on checkout like a lot of companies do to understand where people are saying they heard us, right? Which is interesting. And so, what we found even when comparing that to measured, podcast is a place where people will indicate they heard us, right? At a higher level than we might have assumed. Now, I don't, like I think we were talking about earlier, right? there is no perfect measurement. They're all wrong to some extent. It's just, what are you going to trust? What's your directional source of truth? And then how do you ideally use that in decision making? So of course we are a measured client, but we do also look at our checkout data, and we're kind of looking at that. And it's not to say that changes how we spend per se, but with something like podcast popping on that kind of data that's coming direct from our customer, it's something that I feel confident about we should continue to spend in.
Yeah, absolutely. All models are wrong. Some are useful. I think triangulating data from different sources can be really impactful. And then the second thing is, if you've got something like a media mix model with measured, having the testing data to refine that can also be really impactful. And I think that's something that you guys have experienced as well as it pertains to CTV specifically.
Yeah, it's been really great to see. I'm very excited about CTV. So it's been great to see through some of the testing we've done and the data we've gotten from Measure that it's definitely an incremental channel for us, and we had room to increase our budgets. So that's, again, we have not yet. We have more testing to do because we're really trying to figure out how much of our budget should be allotted to that channel, but it's definitely something that stood out especially over the past 6 months.
Amazing. Well, I want to change gears a little bit. You've seen a lot of success with customer acquisition and growth this year. What strategic shifts have you made from a performance marketing standpoint to enable that growth?
One is at a higher level, really focusing on the creative and going back to the roots of who we are as a brand and what we know our customers come to us for, which is solving their problems, which we call problems sometimes in our marketing. Every woman is a problem. We're here to help. And so sometimes it's easy to get swayed by either agencies or teams, that you need to do certain kind of ads and things like that. And we've done it all over the years. And it warms my heart to see that the things that I know we do well and what our customers trust us to do actually work. So that let's assume we all have great product. Not everyone does, but let's assume you have if you have a great product, the second piece of it isn't necessarily the channel. It's how you communicate the value of that product to your customer. And so inherently that's about what he or she cares about, not about what you care about as a brand. And oftentimes brands get it wrong. It's very easy to be like, well, what my customer cares about is X. And like sometimes you see that it actually isn't. So for us, again, solutions. So I think for example, our minimizer bra does extremely well. It helps, reduce someone's chest by about 2 inches. Like that is problem solving at the core. We have a new push-up bra. It does the opposite. It adds 2 inches. We've the breadth of that. And so really thinking about how those products are helping women achieve something they're looking for, and really making great ads that really show those. That's been really important. So again, creative, without good creative and good copy, nothing's going to work anyway. Mm-hmm. You can spend all the money in the world. And then more specifically, just really, we've done a lot of, as you know, incrementality testing across different channels. So really seeing sort of where things are working to attract, in particular, new customers has been really valuable for us as we continue to shift budgets. But things change month to month, as we all know. So there's no finite solution for any brand or spend. It's sort of how it's evolving over time.
That makes so much sense. I remember early on in my career, I was in an interview and the interviewer asked, we were talking very technically about performance marketing, and he asked, so how do you think creative plays into this? And I just kind of froze and I just said, it's everything. You can have the most perfect technical setup. You can have a phenomenal measurement setup. But if you don't have good creative, it's not going to go anywhere. And then you can have phenomenal acquisition, but if you don't have a strong product, then your retention is always going to hold you back from profitability and growth.
Absolutely. Yeah. So it's the trifecta and it doesn't stop. So that's what's fun about being a brand owner or in marketing. I mean, it's an incredibly exciting place to be.
Yeah, I love that. And okay, so Fun question. Maybe not fun question. I might be bringing back past trauma, but as a founder, can you tell me about a time that you thought, we might not make it through this? And then what you did to make it through?
Yeah, there's been many near death experiences, as we like to call them. The hardest one and the most recent one was really getting to profitability. As a D2C brand who came up through the times of spend and grow top line, and profitability doesn't matter, that'll all figure itself out later, and money is cheap and there's a lot of it to be had. We were core to that. I mean, ThirdLove was an online brand before direct to consumer was a term, so we were one of the original set. And so a couple years ago now, when all of that changed really like very, very quickly, it was a big challenge for us and me as a leader to say, how do we take this company where we haven't made money and get it to be a real business that is generating free cash flow? So, part of that is restructuring teams. Part of that's really thinking about marketing budgets and what we can afford to spend as a percent to total of our business. And how do you do that and continue to innovate product and continue to launch great product and continue to deliver on a promise to a customer that's premium, better fit, better service, better product. We had to continue delivering on that and get to profitability. So it was a lot of things that kind of came together to do that. And obviously changing the team's mentality was a big piece of that. So this will be our third year of profitability this year, and it feels really good. It was not easy, but, we've definitely done it and feel really good about where we're at and where we're going.
That's such an achievement to have 3 years of profitability. And in my experience, repeat purchase retention is critical to that. Like, you can be first order profitable on your new customer acquisition, but the business as a whole is not going to be able to be profitable unless you have good retention rates, which speaks to your retention program, but the quality of the product and the brand as well. Do you have any advice for CEOs in a similar position? Most have probably had to figure it out or are in a really challenging situation now, but advice for other CEOs who are trying to take their company profitable?
Yeah, I mean, start with the basics and really go back to sort of it's sort of like the creative. I oftentimes find in early stage and later stage, things get very complicated when you're trying to do too many things. And as your teams become leaner and your budgets become leaner, you have to become laser focused on what's the most important. So it always goes back to prioritization, right? What are we focused on? And so if you can really do a couple of those things well, it's the 80-20 rule, and it applies in most things, product marketing to some extent. So really looking at your product portfolio, where is your highest repeat rate? Like, you can pull that data, right? And it might not be what you think, and that can tell you something. Maybe you need to be changing your entry point for new customers, or maybe you are in the right place and what you find is your customer. For us, this holds true, but it's changed over time, tends to buy the same thing the second time she purchases. So, and there is ways she moves out from the product she bought the first time. So what does that mean about a product portfolio? How many products do we need? How many products does anyone need? So it's complicated, but it's actually not so complicated if you look at the core journey and also look at your best customers. Like, what are they doing? What are they buying? When are they buying? And then how do you ideally replicate marketing, loyalty programs, or an experience that guides a customer on the path to being one of your better customers? What does that journey look like? And if you focus on those things and let go of 50 other things, I think most companies can get there.
Yeah. An RFM report, reach frequency monetization. I think that's what you're referring to there. And I had a brand that I was working with at one point, and apparel brand, and they had a backpack. And for whatever reason, when anyone bought this backpack, they were not coming back. And so one of my most common rants has become feed curation. Like, the other day on Instagram, I got served an ad from Nordstrom's, and it was for a $10 like plastic like sea creature. I don't remember exactly what kind of, but it was like why is this coming to me from Nordstrom? And it's like a dynamic product ad, but they never curated the feed. And so they're spending money on an impression to send me some little plastic toy that they have like a STEM section of their website. Who knew? All that to say, figuring out what your hero products are and then introducing new customers on those hero products is so important to then building that lifetime value down the road.
Yeah, and then beyond that, the key at the higher level business objective, right, is the more volume and scale you have in products, we all know the costs come down. So your margin then gets better, which is a reinforcing positive loop of, profitability in your business. And so, yeah, these minutiae, like the small things that you don't sell that much of that are low AOV or low AUR and don't have a lot of volume tend to have the worst margin. So you ideally are caught in a positive loop and not a negative loop, but we all at times get caught in negative loops, and it's really identifying them. And a lot of times brands, even us, we've had a hard time walking away from something because it feels like you're failing, right? Like, oh, that product didn't work, or that size didn't work, or these groups of sizes, but it's the best thing you can possibly do because it actually creates more focus in your business.
That makes so much sense. Speaking of downward loops, how do you feel about promotions and sales?
Yeah, I mean, we used to never do them and now we do. Yeah. Look, I think we've all trained the customer. It's been a tough global macro environment for a couple of years. The highlight is getting smarter about who needs them when. And that's the biggest focus we have, right? Is that, of course, a couple of times a year we'll do site-wide sales. That's great. But really thinking about, and there's, I would say we found probably at least 30 to 40% of our customers don't really need a discount, right? So how do we identify them? How do we offer value in ways that might not be through discounting, right? Is that through, for us, our loyalty program that we launched about a year ago has been really successful because it helps provide value and value to the customer and frequency of shopping in a way that feels less impactful to price, even though of course that's in essence what somebody's getting is some kind of pricing discount or an extra product, things like that. It feels like they're more part of a community versus just seeing promotions all the time. But it's hard. It's hard to walk away from it.
Yeah, it's a challenge that I've seen so many brands go through, and particularly with new customers acquired on sale, it's very challenging. I don't know if it's even possible to convert those into full price customers.
And that might be okay, right? If you can
Yeah.
group them, right? And there's certain times of year and they're incentivized to buy, like in some ways you might not have had them if you didn't have that. But that doesn't mean everyone. Yeah. Again, going back to identity and really understanding who's on your site and being better at targeting the groups you need to, that's, the holy grail.
Yes. Yeah, it is for sure. And how did you go about segmenting your customers and figuring out who needs a discount and who doesn't?
I mean, some of the work our data team's done has really been around just looking exactly at what we talked about, which is that, a group of course, one that most retailers know is you get a lot of new customers come in Black Friday, Cyber Monday, because it really incentivizes them, right, to try it because they've been waiting and maybe they don't know, or maybe it's slightly above the price that they're willing to pay. So we try to do analysis to say, when we look at that group, like what do we find? And in particular for us, the first 30 to 60 days after that first purchase are the most important. It's the most important part of the journey. So what we found is, there is the subset of the group that does come back to make a purchase that is more full price, or what I would call, not deeply discounted in Q1. And a lot of our product strategy focuses on that as well. So we always tend to drop a brand new product or style in Q1 because it's a really important time of year for us, but it's also a way to say, hey, if you bought whatever bra, like we launched a new wireless push-up bra in Q1 and we sold out of it in 8 weeks. And part of it was that there was the customer demand, and a lot of the customers who were coming back to buy that product were the ones we had acquired during the holidays. So certainly not everyone is going to be that, but we use data, we track, and then we again try, like, how do we try to create the behavior through the kinds of marketing that we're doing.
I love that example. At one point, I was looking at customer acquisition cohorts by month of acquisition, and I found that the lifetime value of customers acquired in September, but primarily October, tends to be highest because it's timed perfectly to come back for Black Friday and Cyber Monday to have your second purchase. Once you have two purchases, you're much more likely to make a third. So a lot of analysis around that can be so interesting and impactful. Yeah. Okay. New topic here. Growing up, my twin sister and I played the flute, and there was a running joke: how do you get two flautists to play in tune? And it was something to the effect of get rid of one. And sometimes I know it can feel like that with a CMO and a CFO when it comes to the gridlock around numbers. How have you broken through that?
Are you guys identical?
We are identical. Yeah. So if you ever see me and I'm not friendly, it's because it wasn't me.
So you look very much the same. We look today.
Okay. She lives like 4 blocks away from me, and literally, if I meet someone playing volleyball or whatever, I'll say like, hey, just so you know, because it's happened. Like, I used to live in a high rise, and my neighbor came to me one day and was like, hey, is everything okay? And I was like, yeah, I'm fine. And well, I saw you in the elevator yesterday, and you seemed like you were in a really bad mood.
Oh my gosh.
It wasn't me. It was my twin.
That's fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. There is always I always say that there's a tension between creative and marketing, right? There's always that brand versus performance tension. There's lots of tensions in any consumer company, and that's actually good because the push-pull of planning inventory versus, the budget from finance and the merchandise. Like, there's always these tensions across teams that are really, really important. Marketing, though, and measurement of marketing is a hard one because of how finance teams build models, right? And so they're working in, tandem with their partners to build budgets for the year that we all collectively need to hit, right? And where I've seen things get the most difficult over the years, which is part of the reason we brought on Measured in the past year or two, is because we were not speaking the same language. And I can say we because I sit on both sides, right? Like I work closely with my finance team. I'm working very closely with my marketing team as well. And I understand the frustrations of both groups. And a lot of it goes back to like, what are we actually looking at as the source of truth, and how are we allotting budget, and then how are we rolling that up to create our financials? And so you need both because you need the tension, but they at least need to be speaking and looking at the same data set. And if you're not doing that, which most companies many times are not, that's why they're constantly, you hear it from both sides. It's because there's no single source of truth.
And how did you approach bringing together the CMO and CFO to say, hey, Measured's going to be our source of truth, so we're speaking the same language going forward?
In essence, we were, prior to Measured, doing what probably a lot of companies do, right? Which is you're looking at last click, you're looking at your finance team in particular is likely, maybe they are using cohorts too, which we did, but at some point in the model, they're really looking at traffic and conversion. So it's like traffic times conversion equals customers and revenue, et cetera. The problem is if you're using last click data and that's how you're allotting spend by channel, right? Then in essence, it's going to tell you to spend more on the most, efficient ways of converting a customer through last click, which would be, right, Google. And might be, to some extent, social, gets a decent amount of credit, but yeah.
It's Google, it's brand, it's affiliate, right. Coupons, yeah.
Yeah, like the things that get somebody to move. So that doesn't inherently, if the marketing team starts is doing that to basically create the data finance needs, they're making the wrong decisions for the business. But anyway, so I basically said we have to come together to agree. We all know what I just described. Everyone does, if finance included, that what I said is not correct. That's not the right way to spend money. It's not the right way to think about how do you go out and find your next new best customer, right? That's not the right way. And oftentimes you see it in your metrics over time, right? And it might work for a certain amount of time, what I'm talking about, because when you're just starting to scale and you're newer, there's just more efficiencies to be had, as we all know, and then that declines over time. So really it was about like what platform are we all going to trust that can run the kinds of tests that we need to feel confident about certain channels and the incrementality of them. And to me, that's the biggest point of differentiation, and why we chose measured and got alignment there was really to say, we have a finite budget. So it's like, if we're going to go out and spend an extra X amount of money, or we're going to shift money, we want to know we're spending that money in the place that's going to be the most effective at driving a sale that if we didn't spend money wouldn't have happened, right? And in essence, that's what incrementality is for people who may or may not know the term. It's like really like where should that next dollar go that's going to work the hardest for you as a brand? And so I built consensus around like, does everyone agree with this concept? Yes, hopefully we're all here. Yeah. And then can we use the data as the source of truth in our weekly and daily meetings on performance, right? And so we use like the measured data is what we use when we look at efficacy of channel. And our finance team uses it, and our marketing team. That was a very long answer, but so and it's made a huge difference. It really has, in terms of just how well those two teams in particular are working together today.
Yeah, I've been on the front lines of seeing so much frustration between the two parties, because both of them are trying to do what's best for the company long term. They both have the best of intentions, but they're speaking different languages. When you're looking at last click seems like it has to be correct. And then you've got this concept of incrementality, which is such a long word. My phone still doesn't even recognize incrementality as a word. It wants to autocorrect it to incremental when it just means actual. It just means did this drive a result that wouldn't have otherwise occurred? And so bringing everyone together, I think, is really important for long-term sustainable growth, because another trap that brands can fall into is oscillating between, we're going to look at last click, we're going to look at platform, we're going to look at our multi-touch attribution or MTA, and not fully buying in together on one source of truth, because otherwise it's so subjective to bias of what you think is working. You can find something that's going to tell you like this is working when it's not, just because platforms generally are pretty good at attribution. Yeah, with Pinterest excluded. Pinterest is super incremental, but for some reason when it comes to taking credit, they're not doing so hot.
Maybe they need to look into that.
Yeah, I know. We work very closely with them. It's actually, from an ROI perspective, it is the most incremental channel measured, and lower levels of investment that it can take than Google or Meta other channels, of course. But like just from a pure ROI perspective, it's the highest. But from an in-platform perspective, it's always one of the lowest, which is fascinating.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. So how has measured enabled you to make better decisions around budgeting and channel mix?
Yeah, so I think in terms of from channel mix, it's really we are running different incrementality tests over time on different channels. And so that's helped us really say, is this channel performing? How is it performing? What do we know about it? And also being able to use historical data too, as well as test data to more deeply understand. And we've sort of worked our way through, I believe we started with Meta, because similar to a lot of brands, we spend a lot there. But I know we're even doing some newer tests again, because it's been, probably a year since we did our first batch, or over a year. And that's the other thing that is really important, is that it's not like you do it once and it's done. You do it once and across your channels, and then you need to keep doing it, right? So it's there because things are shifting. So this isn't a set it and forget it. It's more like, let's start, get all the data we need to have a baseline idea of channels. And then, we think about sort of testing into increased spend on channels. And so, like I said, I think for us, CTV, we're still trying to find where is that area of diminishing return for that specific channel? And we don't quite have the answer yet. And that's okay. Like, we'll get there. So it's working in tandem, both from the here and now. And I think but we did use measured at a high level to plan our budgets by channel for 2025. They have shifted, as you would imagine, based on what we've learned. So it always makes me laugh to some extent, the idea of, having a marketing budget by channel, which of course you need for your partners and to manage your business and to manage the partner. But really, truly, no one should know exactly what they're going to spend. The marketer.
I've always thought of media planning as like a cookie recipe, because if you can use a cookie analogy, you have to use a cookie analogy, where you put all the ingredients in and then you put it on the tray and you think like, hey, this dough is a little bit sticky, whatever, and you make adjustments to it in real time. You don't just, follow the recipe and stick it in the oven and like hope it comes out okay. I think that approach to media planning, where you use something that has been scientifically proven to be pretty good, and then you make real time adjustments, and that's why the agile MMM that Measured has to offer is so important too, because if you just have traditional MMM alone, you're getting those maybe quarterly, 60 days delayed. It's not going to give you the real-time feedback that you need to fully optimize your budget. Versus if you have real-time experimentation, because another thing that you touched on that I think is so important is incrementality is not a static coefficient. Mm-hmm. It's going to change. And I see some marketers that it almost feels like they're scared to see their coefficients in the dashboard change over time. But during the peak season, your media is going to be way more incremental. When you have great creative, when you have a new product, your media is going to be far more incremental. And in other periods, it's not. And that provides such helpful feedback to be able to know we need to make optimizations to this channel, or proof to go back to creative team and say, hey, influencer ads are way more incremental than your dynamic product ads, so we need to invest more there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, and it's a good point, even about seasonality. It gives you the ability to understand, and this doesn't work for all brands, but certainly like, when do you want to spend? Like, when are you willing or need to take a lower return to drive the business? Or are there ways you can hold back and be more thoughtful about when you're spending, because over time you have more data. And you generally, seasonality is a real thing for almost every business. And that's also something that's really important as you think about how you're spending your money throughout the year.
Speaking of seasonality, you're moving into a fun new season in the business where you're expanding into retail and wholesale. Are there any new marketing strategies or tactics that you're excited to launch as part of that?
Yeah, I mean, the first is really solidifying like our customer data across channel, and in particular our loyalty program, which, because we weren't operating our own stores originally and now we are, is a real benefit to continuity of experience and really identifying and making sure that customer experience in store is as good and seamless as it is online. So that's hugely important. As we're opening a few more stores in the Bay Area over the next 6 months. So we're excited to get to a place where we can actually do some more localized marketing at scale, which we will plan to do next year in 2026. And that'll be the first time as a brand we've ever done that. But once we have 4 to 5 stores, we're sort of covering the Bay Area, and then we'll really think about being able to do more of that as we continue to expand nationally. So
I think that's such a smart strategy. And I also have noticed throughout all of this how your answers always start with data. It always starts with doing your homework, for lack of a better term, on what the numbers are telling you, and then drawing your subsequent action and conclusion out of that. I'm very impressed by that. But I also think it's so smart how you're centering. A lot of the effectiveness of marketing has to do with reach and frequency over time. You need that reach to be to a point of saturation, and that frequency to be high enough that it aids recall, but not so high that it just annoys people. And so your rollout strategy there makes so much sense from a marketing perspective as well.
Well, thank you, and I'm excited for it. It's not how we originally did it, but we're doing it now. So we,
Yeah.
we always learn from mistakes too, which it's interesting because originally that is how we were thinking about it. We didn't do it for a variety of reasons, and now we're kind of coming back to it. And that's kind of what I went back to at the beginning. It's the biggest piece of advice I always have is like trust your gut and do what you think is best. Like at the end of the day, if you're the CEO or the founder, like you are the closest to the company. You know the brand, you know the product, and oftentimes sometimes people try to get you to do something that inherently doesn't feel right or doesn't make sense. And you got to really listen to your gut. Oftentimes your gut's telling you something. So, that's why we have one.
Yeah. And even on the off chance that your gut is wrong here or there, which most of the time it won't be, but when it is, as long as you're decisive and you learn from
Yep.
it and you're willing to look back to the data, I completely agree. One more for you here. So, having effectively restructured your marketing team for growth, what principles guided you in that restructuring? And do you have any advice that you would give to other people who are managing teams through a similar situation?
Yeah, to me, one of the biggest things in marketing are you doing it in-house or are you outsourcing? And that's really, really important. And then if you are using agencies, it's a different skill set to manage an agency than it is to manage a platform. Now, I'm stating the obvious, but years ago when ThirdLove first started, we did mostly everything in-house. There weren't as many channels, and the ecosystem was very different in terms of agencies to some extent. Now what I find is there's so many agencies that are so specialized in their distinct vertical, right? That they really deeply understand affiliate, or they really deeply understand search, Google, et cetera. And so I really, as a CMO or a CEO, really thinking about what do you own in-house or not. And that also pushes back into creative. And then how do you set your teams up for success to manage? That's a big one. And then obviously for me, it always holds true that having marketers who are willing and want to learn more than one vertical, so to speak, is really important. Even though we're a bigger company and we're at a growth stage, we still consider ourselves a startup. So the idea of being like really siloed or really like, I do this one thing, for me, because the ecosystem evolves so quickly, I believe we all need people who can learn new things and want to. So those are two things we've thought about holistically as our marketing team has evolved.
Yeah, it might feel obvious to you coming out of the other side, but I don't think that it's very obvious to most people that the skill of being a marketer versus managing an agency or a partner are completely different things. And I think that's a really important point to highlight as well. Yeah. Wonderful. Well, I don't know if this works the other way. If you want to ask me any questions, you're welcome to. Thanks for playing 20 questions with me.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm sure everyone's sitting here. I think what you said about Pinterest is interesting. You see performance and incrementality across so many brands, so many verticals, and so many channels. Besides Pinterest, like what are you seeing, and where do you think marketers should be spending more of their time? Either investigating or just, best practices.
Yeah, I love that question. A few things come to mind. One is let's speak fashion specifically, about 45% of total marketing budget right now is being spent on social channels. Predominantly Meta, a little bit of TikTok, Pinterest, Snapchat has made a tiny resurgence. Reddit still hanging on there with a couple accounts as well too. But that's where the bulk of spend is still going because of its ability to be disruptive. Most other platforms have to capitalize on some other type of intent. But what I've seen to be one of the most important factors in setting up your media strategy is clear funnel segmentation. I know the traditional funnel is top, middle, bottom, cold, warm, hot. I've come to believe the funnel has 4 stages. It has awareness, prospecting, retargeting, and retention. And the more you can define, awareness is people that have never had any trackable interaction with your brand before, and it's some upper funnel event, not optimized for sales or purchases. And then prospecting, again, as cold as you can make it, but optimized for purchases now. retargeting, people that have had some past interaction, retention, past purchasers. And you can segment that into active, pre-lapse, lapse, something along those lines too. But making sure that your funnel goes like this. And a lot of times I'll see and look at it not based on a percent of budget, but based on the reach of those audiences. You need your awareness to have larger reach than your prospecting, your targeting, and your retention. And breaking out of the old method of like, we need to have certain percents of budget because your awareness campaigns are going to be much cheaper to reach 1,000 people. Your CPMs, then your retention campaigns are going to be much more expensive. So thinking about that more holistically, but we just ran a test on Pinterest with another fashion brand. And they were using Performance Plus, which doesn't really allow you, or didn't, it does now, really allow you to have exclusions. So they walked away with a 2.65 ROIs and a ICAC that was the same as their AOV. So that would be like a 1 return on ad spend for new customers, which isn't really going to work for that business. Then they went back, they added exclusions since Pinterest rolled out this new feature. Their IROS went from a 2.56 to a 2.51, little decline, but their ICAC dropped in half. So essentially, they were, if you're just looking at it from a channel perspective, blended IROAS, you're going to say, hey, it's better not to have exclusions. And that's why you see such strong performance from ASC and Performance Plus and Performance Max, because it's all blended together. But the more you can segment out a clean funnel, the more incremental you can make your media become. I just sat with this spreadsheet and just was like, this is why I love what I do.
I love your excitement too. You're like, that's another thing you need in your marketing team, right?
Yeah.
Excitement around the discovery, right? And excitement around the learning, because not everything works, to your point. Sometimes you're like, oh my gosh, this is amazing, and look what we learned. And then sometimes you're like, oh man, I'm so bummed. I thought this thing was going to be, and it doesn't. So
Yeah. So whatever channel you're on, having a very clear funnel, I think, is my number one advice. But then TikTok has been performing very well if you can get the right kind of creative. I tend to compare it to, like, I'm me, I know who I am, but who I am in a business setting versus with my friends versus with my family. They're all different facets of my personality. And in the same way, a brand needs to show up with different facets of their personality on different channels in order for it to feel native. And I found that creating a CTV asset or even a TV spot is now easier for brands than truly embracing the lo-fi content creator. It's not perfect. The bed behind the creator is not made. They didn't steam the product. They didn't use the exact right vernacular, that type of creative. But that's, if you want to go that route to TikTok and Reels and YouTube, that's the type of content that you have to figure out a way to embrace. So that's another area that I think brands can continue to grow their audiences, particularly brands that are wanting to resonate with a younger consumer.
yeah, no, you're right. And TikTok's a unique animal, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's a tough one. It needs so much creative, and it's one of few platforms where your organic presence really does seem to matter. Like Pinterest, you can take your meta ads, throw them on Pinterest, it'll work. But TikTok,
Not
a lot
so
of
much.
creative, organic presence, spark ads, all of that have to happen.
Yeah.
But I think it can be a little bit more scalable than some of the other smaller platforms that are worth diversifying investment to. But overall, Meta is still going to be, for the foreseeable future, the largest investment for fashion brands. Other platforms don't have as large of an audience or don't have the same ability to build trust and interrupt. I've enjoyed our conversation so much, and thank you for chatting through Measured and your strategy. And I especially loved you sharing the challenges that you had throughout your time and how you've made it through those. I find those really inspiring. I know other entrepreneurs and founders will as well.
It's been great to chat. Love talking about marketing.
Yes.